Today's episode of the Dr. Mollie James Show features Lieutenant Colonel Dr. Pete Chambers. He is a popular guest on the show, former Army Green Beret flight surgeon. Now he is the president of the Remnant Ministries, and learn all about what his organization is up to. We get into the weeds on his separation from the Army over the COVID illegal shot mandates. We talk about the Declaration of Military Accountability and where the DoD is going now. We talk about the border and what is happening to the children coming across. We get into Tren de Aragua and North Carolina. We'll cover it all today, so stay tuned for Dr. Pete Chambers. Welcome back, Doc Pete. We're glad to have you. I think you are the most frequent guest on the show so far.
Well, that's an honor, first of all, Doc Molly. I do appreciate being back. It's been a go. Of course, we've seen you out on the trail quite a bit these last few trips, so I'm sure we got a lot to talk about.
We do. And yeah, I didn't even have North Carolina on my agenda, but we can get to that too. So last time we were on, you had just left the military. So I kind of want to go back and bring these stories forward. So
Sure.
remind the audience, if maybe they're hearing this for the first time, you were on the border in the military.
hmm
Tell them what happened and then where we are with that now.
Okay. So yeah, I served from 1983 till 2022. Got out a couple years ago, but before that, before I got out, I was working on Operation Lone Star, which is the Texas state version of the response to the border before the Trump administration came in and really took a lot of the reins and a lot of the pressure off the state alone, which is great. So I was working on the border. I was a task force surgeon, liaison to law enforcement, special operations as well. Kind of was a dual-hatted position, as I was a dual-hatted guy. So I'm on the border, got about 600 soldiers under me that I'm the task force surgeon over, and then that grew, and it grew to about 3,000 soldiers. And then by the time I left, it was about 6,000. And I was the only surgeon down there, and it was a big job, right? I had a bunch of PAs, which awesome, helped out, but I was traveling a lot. During that same time, the mandates came upon the military's mandates with regard to the COVID vaccine, and we knew that it was a emergency use authorized vaccine only. We knew the regulations. The regulations clearly state must perform and conform consents. That simple. Didn't know anything about COVID when it came out. Saw the initial stuff that was coming out. The VAERS wasn't out yet. The DMED, the Defense Medical Epidemiology Database, wasn't out yet. But I was just noticing anecdotally, empirically, just really what I was seeing with my troops, that people were getting sick. All right, so that was the kickoff for me. I started really looking into it. Matter of fact, I tested once positive for COVID. I wasn't sick, but they told me you got 10 days of quarantine. So it was awesome. So for 10 days, I sat in my trailer and produced a 70-page PowerPoint on informed consent, which gave me all the free time in the world to do, which is awesome. In doing that, then as soldiers started coming on the border, I started giving informed consents. Nobody was taking the shots, right? I mean, that's just what was happening. Because I said, you don't have to. There's no reason. You're healthy. You don't need to do it. I think out of the 3,000 or some odd people that came on, all the informed consents at groups of 500 at a time, I would give the briefs as they came on. Literally, maybe 7 or 8 people took the shots. They felt they needed to, whatever. Some of them came on the border already with them on board. Nothing I can do about that. When I did that third time and I sent the shot team back to Austin, Texas, 5 hours back north from the Rio Grande, they said, all right, we're going to send a general down this time. So the general came along with them. That outranks me by 1, 2, 3 ranks. And I was a lieutenant colonel. And the general said, Doc, it ain't about the science, it's about the policy. Which I said, sir, let's think about what you're saying. Let's think about this. And he said, yeah, okay, well, it doesn't matter. It's about the policy. We got to get more people. We got to get on the board. Get on with the team. And I'm like, that don't make a lick of sense, sir. And so I think I said that respectfully. And I think there was a 1-star in the room and a colonel, bird colonel underneath him, a friend of mine who did support what I was doing. Kevin Boats, I can say his name now. He's out. He doesn't mind. He was the only one that supported me in the whole Texas Military Department leadership, although he wasn't the highest ranking guy. So he couldn't do anything about it. And so when the general said, you must stop doing informed consents, I said, sir, at this point, that's an unlawful order. And when you say that to a general, there's this game that they like to play. We call it rock, paper, scissors, right? They call it rock, paper, rank. He won. So there you go. I get fired. I leave the border. I go out and I start doing, and I retire. I had 39 years total time with 20 good years, active duty time underneath my belt. So I could retire, which was awesome. I got out, started working on the border by myself with my dog, took my horse, went down to the border and was advising local ranchers and people along the border how to create denied territory, denied space from cartel guys coming across and transferring people, fentanyl, guns, you name it, going north. Uh, Typically, other guns and money going south. That's what we were looking for. In doing that, though, I met a bunch of guys up in Central Texas. We got together and we formed the band, right, so to speak. And the band is the Remnant A Team. And then after that, the Remnant Ministry came along because we really found that we were all men of faith. We were all kind of on our way to figuring out what faith really meant and what Jesus really is. And then the next thing you know, we're a tight band of merry men going on our way and doing God's work. And that leads us to where we're at now.
Yeah, perfect. So let's go back a little bit. So
Hmm?
you were featured in a movie called This Is Treason.
Yes.
I think that's an important thing to bring forward because the Trump administration versus the Biden administration, there's a bit of difference in how things are running. So can you
Sure.
elaborate on that a little bit? And I was blown away by the movie.
Yeah, so This Is Treason, J.J. Carroll. We filmed that one up in one of our associate members of our task force, Basel Boz. He's with the Association for the Recovery of Children. We do the precursory work for child rescue stuff. We don't kick the doors, but they do. Anyway, we're up at this place, up doing some training, and JJ comes in, says, "I'm bringing a team in. We're going to film this thing." And we had some interviews. And so what we did was Boz, myself, Mike Hall, also on our team. We interviewed, and in that, those were added to the movie. Now, it was a small part in there, and there's another one to come out afterwards, specifically talking about border situation. But with that one, we were talking about treason, right? And so there was a letter that had come out that the 231 signatories of military members, either out or still in, signed on the 1st of January last year, came out at 0400 hours, and it was delivered directly to the Joint Chiefs, to include General Milley and to include the Secretary of Defense, Lloyd Austin. Now, bear in mind, I've testified versus Lloyd Austin in court in a federal court case in Tampa, SEALs versus DOD / Lloyd Austin. So I'm not really a person that he likes too much or did like, and it didn't matter. We told the truth. We did testify in a federal court case, and we were allowed and entered in the data, the DMED data, along with Teresa Long and myself at that court case, which is the data that shows kind of the military version of VAERS, the VAERS system, a reporting system for vaccine injury. But the more important point is that there were some things that were done by the military which were illegal, immoral, and unethical. And so when those things happened, that was entered into court, but nothing really happened because remember now, as you said, that was during the Biden administration. Now the Trump administration's in charge. We got Pete Hegseth at the helm, took Lloyd Austin's job. Thank goodness. And so we're seeing some light, but of course, a lot of people, it's not happening fast enough. And what that means is what that letter said was, here's what happened. These are I'm going to call them sometimes atrocities. These are some of the things that were illegal that resulted in people dying from COVID vaccine or being debilitated, sometimes for life. These are the strong arm techniques that were used against the soldiers, sailors, airmen, and marine that said, I'm not taking the shot. These are the things that they did to the providers that said, we will do informed consents. So you saw this shadow policy take place that nobody really could put their finger on
Mhm.
because the military is made up of fiefdoms, and this is what ultimately results in. And what I mean by that, well, there's a Secretary of Defense and there's a Joint Chiefs, and all that stuff resides in the Pentagon in Washington, D.C. But each command is its own fiefdoms. You have the Northern Command, you have the Southern Command, you have the European Command, Southcom, or let's see, trying to think, SOCOM, Special Operations Command. So you have all these commands that exist, Pacific Command, and that's a fiefdom. And then underneath that, you have the individual units, right? So the bases, and so all the military bases and posts, and they have commands. So the flavor of the commander at that post, who runs his own inspectors general, right? So the people that would inspect him really are there for the leisure of the command. So if you say, "Hey, there's a commander here down in Podunk, Iowa, that is doing this or that," well, we don't really care because that guy's going to investigate himself, and so nothing got out. Right? That's the problem set. And so our intent was to say, "Hey, big army, this is the problem, and there will be accountability that'll come down the path." That's it all in a nutshell. 40,000 foot view.
Yeah. And are we seeing that accountability now that Pete Hegseth is in charge? I mean, he's had a chance now to settle in. Is that coming? Is it happening?
Right. Yeah, we've seen some. Okay, so what we've seen is generals fired. We've seen some of the more egregious with regard to what they did during the COVID fight, what they did with regard to DEI and woke policies. But we've seen some of that stuff hide because the fiefdoms can hide things. These subunits can hide things, and they can move them into different places. So we haven't totally um, deleted deleted those general officers that were put in during the Obama administration. Remember when Obama came in, or if you don't know, when Obama came in, he just basically said they voted Republican, get those generals out. That's what he did. That was his litmus or his metrics for that. For this, in this case, it was based upon the information that we collected, the 231 plus all the other signatories, tens of thousands now, that have come out and said, okay, here's the truth. This is what this general officer did, and here are the receipts. So now Pete Hegseth can look at those. We recommended at least 200 generals to be either released or put in positions where they didn't have so much authority over a fiefdom or a very large group. So that's what we did, and we gave that to the Trump administration prior to we being not just me. I was just the guy that hands them the information to the Trump team, but the group, the ones that did the homework, they all had it in all the different branches: Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, Coast Guard. They all had the receipts, and now it's just taking time, much like the Epstein files or the J6 stuff. It's taking time for these people to go through. I'm not cutting them any slack by any means, but what I'm saying is it's taking time for this stuff to come down. I pray. I pray somebody has the big picture figured out over there in DC with regard to the Pentagon and all these other debacles, because we still want to see, those that are responsible for the gain of function with regard to the shots. We still want to see them held accountable, right? We still want to see those that were on the dark side of Operation Warp Speed to be held accountable, because there's always a group of people that think they're doing the right thing, but they're being controlled by those that are doing the wrong thing. This is our government in a nutshell. This is what the problem set with bureaucracies.
Yeah, which is why they're fighting so hard as Doge is coming in and auditing them. They're you're seeing what they're doing.
Yeah.
I was flipping through my camera reel the other day and just we're gonna forget some of the crazy ironic things that happened. We had, Biden celebrating a Coast Guard officer who made amazing arrest or an amazing recovery, and a week later got fired because he didn't get the COVID shot.
Oh yeah, that was that poor fella. He was hit hard. I mean, look,
A
no
lot of
matter
people.
what, if you could have some people that are stellar performers in the real world, not the optics world, in the real world of warfighting, saving lives, uh, humanitarian response, all these things. The things that we did on the border with a very small unit, and then what we did hold back. But yet, within a couple weeks after you stand up, you become something called it's a Latin phrase, persona non grata. You're not welcome here. This person is non grata, and that happened to me. I got my retirement came in a FedEx box and said, "Okay, thanks for your service." It wasn't the typical, "Okay, we're going to send you off with a hail and welfare, good job." I don't need all that stuff, but I'm just saying it's just interesting how the guy that came and took my job, the colonel that took my job, got promoted to general now. He's a 1 star, and I got the see you later.
Yeah. Loyalty's fickle, right? When it comes to that.
That's right.
Yeah, for sure. So talking about what you were doing on the border, I think, for people like me who are in the upper Midwest, we don't really know the severity of that and what it looks like to have thousands of people pouring into your country.
Right.
And that was really a setup for what you're doing with the remnant because
Yes.
that gives you the information and background to be able to do what you are doing
Correct.
now.
Correct. So on the border, with regard to when I was on uniform, I saw typically, and this is about 3 or 4 years ago, I saw typically up to about 12,000 people come across the border a month. Okay, just the average week, average month. And then it went to 12,000 a week, right? So it popped up, right? And then I'm just using that as an average because it ebbed and flowed just like anything else. A game of whack-a-mole, if you only have 600 soldiers or even 6,000 soldiers on 1,250 miles of Texas border, it's hard to maintain it all. So you're chasing them around. Now, and then even one night, 12,500 came across at Eagle Pass on the 18th of December 2 years ago. That was just one night. And then 17,000 plus probably about 6,000 that we didn't actually count, but guessing that got around us in Del Rio. We only had about 40 soldiers sitting there waiting for this debacle to unfold, and it did, and it was pure chaos. And that was over a period of 48 hours. And those were from Haiti. And I don't, recall the Mayorkas got on TV and said, "These are not the Haitians you're looking for. They're not here. We're sending them back." They didn't send any of them back. They just put them in the buses and planes and actually flew some of them out of a Air Force base at Laughlin, which is just a little bit north of the town. So that's the game we were playing. It was an optics game, completely optics on the side of mainstream media and the federal government. Now what I'm seeing is that the reality is starting to appear to match up with what the optics are. And the reality says now, I know personally, because I get the report every day, how many people come across that border. And they're typically per day, maybe 30, 60, 100, 120 if it's a lot in Texas, which is amazing. So there is some, all right, let's put it medically speaking. When you have a major trauma on an extremity and you bleed, you put a tourniquet on it, right? You got to stop the bleed. So we've stopped the bleed. Okay, so the bleed is trickling now. The problem is the thousand other cuts. They're not life threatening individually, but they're still there. And that is what I would say is something like the moral bankruptcy of the institutions that are dragging their feet. They're holding they're back on their spurs, trying to keep the not to lose the power that they had. And so we're seeing a lot of that jockeying for those positions at the upper federal level, but also in some of the states. So on the border, because it is very, close to us, we see it a lot more. And so when you see that many people come across, it can be overwhelming, but you get acclimated to it and you start to realize I can only control what I can control. So my job or our job is to look for the bad actors, the terrorists. But in doing that at that time, that was like looking for a needle in a stack of needles. Now it's easier to find, right? So that the country is a little more secure with regard to counter-terrorist and national security issues.
Yeah, so those people out there, the bleeding hearts that are saying these are just people who want a better life, they're just coming here for opportunity so bad in their home country. How do they get here? And is that really the truth of who's coming across our borders?
Right, and so for the majority of that majority of that answer, we always have, immigration coming across the border. We've always had it. And it's something where people come across the border, typically in the Rio Grande. For me in Texas, I can speak for that one as I know, and they were looking for jobs, and they would eventually get a green card, and they would go back home and take the money across the river. And then, but what we saw now is, like pawns, people that were being used for something that is much larger, on a much larger scale. Now we're talking geopolitical scale, a transfer migration, and that's the operative term, transfer migration to do what? Well, to do what? It's a Marxist technique to destabilize a system. The system of immigration in the United States worked. My dad came across, years ago in the late 50s, and he became a legal citizen and went through the whole process. It took him about 8 years, and that's what he did and became a productive member of society. Matter of fact, he graduated from Kirksville College of Osteopathic Medicine, so starting out as an orderly in an emergency room. So you see there was hope. That's the American dream stuff, right? But then you have this thing where you can see these folks coming across being pushed. I watched from the air flying over the Rio Grande once when one of those large groups came across. We were doing the command and control from the air and watch the federales, the Mexican federals, the police, basically, a combination of kind of paramilitary police, military, watch them push thousands of people to the river before a certain deadline as the Remain in Mexico policy was about to be changed. So the Title 42, you may recall. So those things you watch it, but you see their government pushing people across, right? We talk to people like Michael Yon, who sits down there mostly in the Darien Gap or around Panama and watches that little narrow isthmus of land where thousands of people are coming through and call us and tell us, okay, you've got this many coming, right? So we know. But then we hear from him what's going on down there with regard to UNESCO, UN, organization that's involved with the transfer migration. We watch with some of the NGOs. Catholic Charities is one. Hayek is another one. That's a Hebrew charity. Another one is Doctors Without Borders. I like to call them Doctors Without Brains. So you see these people coming across. There wasn't one single physician in that camp down there. Their job was to move people through. So lots of money being given them as donations, but they're just moving people through. And they're giving them maps and they're giving them cell phones, UNESCO, with the bags with a cash card the taxpayers pay for. So we see that happening down there. Now that's stopped. That's a good thing. That stopped. Doctors Without Borders has left the Darien Gap, but those things took what? A lot of exposure, right? Michael Yon had to be down there. He camped out there. He watched this stuff. He did documentaries or he did reports from down there. And then it makes it to the level of it's embarrassing to somebody somewhere, and then they stop doing it. Now, during this administration, much easier because we talk directly to them, right? We can talk directly to. I can talk to anybody at the Department of Defense right now, anybody at the Federal Emergency Management Agency, to include the interim director right now, because we've made a splash, right? We as a group, a small group, but that's just one little group, right? But at least we can talk directly. They're listening to us and they're going, okay, we're going to action these things because we trust you and we can verify that you're a reliable source.
Yeah. Let's talk about a topic that'll bother a lot of people, the children coming across the border. What's happening to them? What are you seeing? And is it as terrible as we think it is?
I think it's more terrible than the average person can even imagine. The average person. Now, you and I, we've had these conversations. We've seen, the first time I really was switched on to it was on the border. I didn't pay attention to who came across or what happened to them as they disappeared. But the problem set lies with um, the draw. Okay, first of all, the draw. What do you want these kids for? Okay, well, some of it's slave labor. Some of it's sex labor, sex trade. Some of it even gets as far as organ harvesting, right? It's not as much, but it's still there. It's still happening. And so when we were seeing the missing numbers on the border, the Department of Homeland Security said missing, when I say that, kids that have come across the border, unaccompanied minors that are missing now out of the books, can't find them. They were saying somewhere around 80,000 were missing. And then we had Miss Tara Rodas go up and testify before the committee up in D.C. and said that on Homeland Security and said that we're actually missing somewhere around 360,000. But now they're saying 500,000, which is what we've been saying since the beginning because we look at the numbers ourselves and we see it, and then we estimate based upon how many we put our hands on, actually physically touched, compared to how many that get away that we just don't see. And so we do the math, it's about 500,000. Well, where are those kids? All right, so Child Protective Services, in conjunction with HHS at the time, Health and Human Services, who's now being run by our friend RFK Jr., are now actually looking into all those lists that Tara Rodas produced. She gave us some of them here in Texas. We found 119 kids where they were. About 35 of them were actually returned. So we're still missing a bunch. That's just one little chunk of them. But the problem is the vetting of the sponsor families. All right, so that's the job between CPS and HHS. So when they go to the border, they end up in a big tent. They run them through there. They get a sponsor family and they go, here you go. Well, the 119 kids ended up with 5 sponsor families in downtown Austin in one block area that was an apartment complex. One of the sponsor families was a illegal immigrant himself, or illegal period, that was out of Guatemala that has a coffee plantation down there. Doesn't live on the site. That's just the name that they used for probably about 80 of those kids. So that's where we're seeing the problem is. The If it was me, if it was my job to secure a kid, I would make sure that the family that we're going to was vetted. Think about people that adopt kids, what they have to go through. And
Mhm.
yet we just hand these children over. So they're missing. They're missing. Now, more of them are being found because they're doing an accountability of it, but that's the purpose of accountability.
Mhm. One of the whistleblowers in the movie This Is Treason, I remember it blew me away, and this is on the light end of what is happening, but he said, "We would get a baby. We would
Mm,
have no diapers, no diaper bag,
I remember
never
that guy.
taking care of a baby, and I would just have a baby I was supposed to deliver somewhere, and I would just drive them and hand them off." And if anybody out there has a child, think about what you do to take care of an infant, what you need to get through a day of an infant,
I
and think
remember
of it.
that fella. I met him. Yeah. And look, he's an honest soul. How
He
many out
is.
there are not? That's
He
the
did some
problem.
and to say, "I didn't realize it, and this was awful." But, I mean, again, that's at the light end of the spectrum of what's happening, right?
Oh, yeah.
That's not the egregious things, but
Yeah.
just to relate it to people who are out there who, maybe care about this, but can't even start to put it in their head what's going on.
Right, and let's consider this because this is what when I because I go and speak a lot on this stuff. One of the main questions or top questions I get is, "But how is this even happening or why?" Everybody wants to know why. I would too. 5 Ws, right? Who, what, when, where, why. So, here's why. Because there's money. Every time one of these children transfers somewhere, okay, they come across the border, somebody's going to start counting that head, right? That person. They call them heads. It's sad, but that's how they think of them. So they're counting heads. So they end up in their facility on the border. Right now, taxpayer money goes to that specific entity that's conducting that intake. All right. That's not Border Patrol. Border Patrol is just the paid dudes that get a paycheck that have to go work there, and they don't want to be in there doing that. They'd rather be patrolling the border, right? Security stuff. So you got these guys counting heads, and so that takes people off the border that are actually looking with binoculars for bad stuff. So now you got one guy every 5 miles versus 15, and so that's a problem set. But now you got them transferring them to some NGO. Boom, NGO starts getting taxpayer dollars. Then they transfer it to another NGO. Boom, to transfer them out to the families. That's another transfer of money. And these are in the tens of thousands of dollars per head. Okay. Right. So now, and then, the one place down there and it was a Walmart in the RGV, right? Rio Grande Valley. And it was, I don't even remember what it was per day, but the per diem for food for them was ridiculous. It was like almost 10 times what they give me when I go out on do mission stuff in the military. So
Yeah.
to feed this person, but then when we got to the really looking, analyzing what they were getting, it was just like this little plastic covered little tray thing with a little, juice and a little old sandwich. They weren't getting gourmet meals, right? So there's transfer of all this money all the way down the line, sometimes as ridiculous as going back to one of the original NGOs. So they're bouncing them every time. New check, new check, new check, new check. That's why. There's a love of mammon, money. People are losing their minds because the amount of money that was made over this, just like the CARE Act with COVID money, was ridiculous. It's just it is the money laundering game of the century that they've done to us with regard to that. Social Security, COVID, it's money laundering on steroids.
Yeah. And I think the Sound of Freedom is probably the most commercialized, most relatable thing that the average person has had access to, where they begin to peek into the window of what you guys have seen on the border. And, it hit me because they said, if I bring drugs over, I sell it one time. I can sell a child 30 times a day, 60
That's right.
times a day.
That's
And
right.
that is such a disgusting thought, but the demand is there. Somebody's buying this product, right?
The demand is there, and unfortunately, in our nation is one of the largest demanders. Largest demand pull in the world, and so it reflects the moral bankruptcy of not only the administration, prior administration, but the bureaucracy for sure to allow this to happen because there's no heart. If you can't, like when I still see eyes of specific kids that came across that border in the middle of the night with hundreds of people coming across that were being transported by men that were not family members, and we would split them up, but we couldn't be at every spot. One spot and on a typical night, 900 people coming through in the middle of the dark, cutting across the river. Uh, but I still see their eyes and I still think, where are they now? Because I handed them off thinking they were going to be safe. but they're not. They're not because they just had a little tag around their neck. 7 and 8-year-old sisters from Guatemala, the specific ones I remember. I have their faces blocked out on my website, but they're there and they've got this little tag around their neck, and it's their aunt in Atlanta. And that's it. That's all they got. But the two guys that were transporting them were not even from the same country. And they were just kind of had their hands on their shoulders, pushing them across while I was watching them, like, stop them right there. What are they doing? Now, that's the tactical level. That's in the dirt. That would be how that movie was represented to most people. But the operational level, somebody's making money, operations. And then at the strategic level, what's the purpose overall? Right? What is the purpose overall in the nation? And it's truly to destabilize. It's to transfer, migrate. It's to bring people in to take jobs. To then, and there's not enough jobs, so some of them are self-deporting just on that alone. They get
Yeah.
transported up to Chicago, and they're on the streets, and they're realizing this isn't the milk and honey that I thought I was going to be seeing. But what's going to happen when that runs out? That free cheese, so to speak. I mean, what's going to happen? They're gonna starve. So I'm watching the border now. I was just down there the other day with Colonel Douglas McGregor, and he was doing a documentary, and I was showing him. I said, "Look, there's now trucks going south with suitcases and families. They're going back home. They don't want to be here because either they're afraid they're going to get rolled up by ICE, which eventually they will. ICE is literally looking for the bad ones right now, the cartels, Trend Aragua, and all those types. But honestly, there's nothing for them here because it's overwhelmed. They if that purpose was sought, that purpose has been achieved. Overwhelmed in many cities.
Yeah. So you brought up Trende Aragua, and I've heard a little bit about this from other podcasts I've watched. How did Venezuelan gang members end up in the United States? Like, I've heard it described as they emptied the prisons in Venezuela and gave them a one-way ticket to the United States.
Specifically, yes, specifically the prison in Aragua, which is the area. So that's where the name comes from. And the tren means the train of Aragua. It's a train. It's just like we're going to bust through and we're going to do this thing. So they're just basically criminals. That was the ones that came across December the 18th. I was talking about Eagle Pass. 12,500. I was there when they came across, and literally dudes with an AK-47 tattoo on their face with nobody's going to do any biometrics on this guy, right? Because we don't do that anymore. We just bring them in. They put them on buses. They sent them to the San Antonio, which is inland in the south central Texas, San Antonio Convention Center. And then they had them all sitting in there. And then they would just start releasing them and giving them court dates, right, to show up 3, 5 years out. But then cartel guys, as we were watching it, were driving up gangs and then meeting them there, almost like they got a free bus service into the country so they could have a LinkedIn job fair. So now these folks are going everywhere, and we're flying them. Some of those getting on planes with little tags on their necks. Except the only problem is this is a 25-year-old gang member that is going to go to work for the trend. But the trend is not a cartel. The trend is just a bunch of criminals that are hired hands. Okay, that's the way I look at them. So the highest bidder, let's say Aurora, Colorado, when they overtook a whole apartment complex, when something like that, they're working for somebody to do that. All right, somebody's using them as the nugs because these guys are dumb in their box rocks, but they're evil, right? If you ever hear of why Rome fell because it allowed the barbarians in the gate, right? They put them in their own military units, and the barbarians you can't negotiate with. These guys only know one thing, and that's evil. They know that if I want that, I take that. Negotiate with that sometime. And that's
Right.
one of the things that we're working on. And it's a hard business. We're just on the front end of that, for the lead end of that. But that's called conflict resolution. All right, try to negotiate with a barbarian sometime. It ain't easy. And I've done it before in Pakistan and Iraq and Syria and you name it. I've done this face to face with bad guys, trying to get them not to cut my head off and put it on the internet, but also to not kill Americans anymore, which is a hard task. But we can do it. It's just we've got to start somewhere, and the answer is not, the answer is definitely deporting them for sure, sending them home, putting them in Guantanamo. I don't care what you do with them, send them out, put them in jails, those criminals. But with regard to the people that are just here in mass, who I feel for, there is a system to come in the country, just like my dad. You can do that, but for
Mhm.
them, um, it's case by case. You got to be careful. There are certain things that you don't want to see happen, which is okay. We're just going to send them out of the country, a mom and some kids, and then they get rolled up and they're back in the game again. So we've got to do that. And so instead of worrying about us going and talking to those individuals, we talk to the people that are pushing them. CPS. So I'm looking forward to a meeting with the HHS director here in the next few weeks. And if I can do that, then I can say, hey, look, we can resolution this thing way down to where it's manageable, and so that we can find solutions for this. Because if we don't, and we just look at it as negotiating with barbarians, but without any tact, we're going to lose that.
So talk to me now. Instead of enjoying retirement and going to do fun things, you've built the Remnant Ministry. So explain what the mission and purpose is of the Remnant and
Right.
what you're up to with that.
So the Remnant Ministry is underneath the 501c3. It's underneath that. There's a subcategory. U.S. code is called a 508c1a, and that is a kind of a. It follows the category, same thing as a private membership association. Under that, there's a category called a association of ministries. That's what we are. So under our bylaws, we for us personally advance the kingdom of God. So we evangelize. We do counter human trafficking, not in the sense of kicking the door, but actually setting up the conditions for law enforcement or those teams to do that. And the third thing is humanitarian response. That's really where we've had most of our action since we've kicked off, because of the fact that those things were laid before us. Western North Carolina, for example. Done some other smaller things. I went to the train derailment in the East Palestine, and sat there and investigated that, and was able to provide a report that went directly to President Trump. While he was not president yet, he was still interested in what was going on. He visited and then spoke some of the points that we gave. So when we do that kind of stuff, it puts us in a category. Okay, these guys know what they're doing, which we do. We're a very small unit, but we are connected to a gathering of eagles, if you will. Other groups like us that are around the country has grown out of the necessity for we the people, or we call it we the remnant, to respond to things on the ground first, as we saw in North Carolina. It was the people. Yeah.
Mhm.
And that's
Great.
that's what we do. So we facilitate that. That's very much a Green Beret mission, by the way. It's what I grew up, not my whole career, but my last part of my career doing. Now
Mhm.
about 20 years of it. So, yeah, that is a career alone. But about 20 years of my life, I was doing that as a physician for them, and also as a Green Beret. So I've done it. I know how to do it, and it's force multiplying. It's just networking. It's moving quickly. It's moving at the speed of war. We call it downrange. Well, now it's fifth generation war. So we've got to move at the speed of fifth generation war, which means every day is different, and it's a lot more fun.
Yeah, for sure. So one of the things you touched on, and I want to go back because this to me ties into what I understand your mission is right now. You would rescue these children, you would turn them over to somebody, and they would get recycled back into the system.
This is a problem. Yeah, that has happened, not with the teams that we work with, because there are organizations out there now and facilities out there now
Mhm.
grew out of this necessity, where, for example, one that's under construction now in Yuba City or Northern California, with Dave Bryant and their church out there, is a former medium security prison that has the rooms and ability to secure people in, and bring in the appropriately vetted personnel that can do what's called the wraparound services. Because you can't just put somebody in there and say, okay, we're going to send you home. They might have psychological issues, medical issues, the things that we know about. Stockholm syndrome is a huge thing, but there are also medical needs that could arise from their captivity. So they go to these facilities, but they're vetted. They're ones that we know. So that's how I use like Basel Boz and Tina Boz. It's Association of Recovery of Children, and just say, hey, what do y'all have that you trust in that area? We're working on with a partner here in Houston, comes out of the oil business, and I'll keep his name off here for now. But he didn't. I didn't ask him. But those guys are raising some money to build one in the Houston area with the largest church in Houston, kind of as a partner. So that's a good thing. So as we build out these facilities, we don't have to worry about putting them back into the child protective system until that gets fixed. It's,
Yeah.
really, honestly, that kind of stuff is not in the Constitution. All right. It's just not. It shouldn't be a federal government job. If our churches actually did what they were supposed to do, our physical four wall churches, which is to provide comfort to people in their communities. If we had that system that still worked, back in the 50s and 60s and 70s, if we were allowed to do that, we would see a lot more. Churches' hands have been tied by the fact that they're 501c3s, and then you can't do things that they consider not church stuff. And so it's really hurt them to be able to do that. And that's our bureaucracies at their finest.
Yeah. So I'm just going to revisit this point because I think again the extent of emotional and physical trauma that somebody goes through when they're captives of the cartel, they can't be put into a foster home. They just can't be put in with the nice lady down the street. They would exceed all needs that an individual, the 360-degree needs are so severe.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
how do you vet somebody, because this industry attracts people who exploit children. So how do you go about as an organization vetting the people to work and take care of
Right.
former victims?
To me, it's going to be all relationship driven at the level that we're at right now for where we're at. Okay. And I don't personally vet them, but I know the person that did. Right. And so then they tell me this person's solid and this is what, because of relationship. It's a very new and upcoming thing right now to build these out. But yeah, you're right. It's going to draw those. The application process is going to be one of those going to be pretty intrusive, and I'm talking about full scope polygraphs. A full scope is a lot different than your basic everyday poly. Some people don't believe in them, but I know that in the mind, if somebody's coming in and knows they're going to get a full scope poly, right? Well, that means your lifestyle as well. That's not just, oh, did you ever sell secrets to the foreign governments or did you ever steal anything? Got it. People can easily go through those things. But when you have to do a full scope as to your own personal lifestyle, that changes everything. That's not the only answer. Obviously, the weeding out to even get to that stage needs to be done by personal vetting, and that's tough. I mean, because there are going to be people that are slip through the cracks, but it's also going to require a second and third order greater observation over these facilities to make sure that they're being watched by somebody within at the top that truly is trusted. And that's I'm not going to run one, so I can't explain how that would look, but I know it can be done.
Mhm. So if somebody is out there and compelled by your story and your service and said, "Hey, I want to help. Like I know trafficking is a problem. I want to contribute to the humanitarian efforts." I get started.
Okay, so there's several ways. At our website, which is the Remnant Ministry TX.org, you can go there and it says contact. Now we've expanded that out really, which we're new with regard to the website. But you can actually say, hey, I want to help. Well, that's trying to describe what you can do in this is like telling somebody, I'm going to show you how to build a watch, but I need you to learn how to tell time first because it's really deep. I mean, just even the conversation we're having now, we're just wave topping it. And so there are ways to help, but investigatory side on the open source intelligence reporting. So people can go to a course that Tina Boz runs and say, okay, I can learn how to then identify the problems in my area. That's the number one thing that we really need because now you can start narrowing it down to many more eyes out there starting to identify problem sets in their communities. That's number one. Then that would be the we will call that the underground, if you will, in the unconventional terms. That they're out there just reporting, seeing, eyes on. The auxiliary in the unconventional world for Green Berets and support, the auxiliary is really like I can't physically do something. I can't get out. I can't get on the road, but I can help. Well, what does that mean? Well, I can actually donate because we run completely donation, 100% operational driven. So there's nobody getting rich off of this. But what this is um, you can give a recurring is what helps us the most, even if it's $20. I don't care. There are people that write checks for $10,000. I think it's awesome. Either way, the widows might, okay, the little tiny bit, whatever it is, collectively, we can fix this problem. And it's not just with us, all these groups. But for us, that's how we run. I mean, that's what puts diesel in the tank, and that's what gets trailers like this, fancy thing that I'm in. So but it's how it works, and that is the hand and the eyes and the feet and the head, the ecclesia, the body of the church. If you're a believer, that's what that is. And if you're not a believer, you still believe that children are precious commodity and should be protected. We still
Absolutely.
believe that when somebody in North Carolina gets hit by a hurricane, which is kind of weird, but anyway, that when that happens and a town is flooded out or wiped off the map, that they still deserve some sort of care and they deserve immediate response. What we did up there, far above and beyond anything that we imagined we could do, because we networked with people that lived there and we got we use 90% of their workforce with our ability to network and say, okay, this is you. And hey, we call back, and Mike Adams out of Texas is sending us 5 truckloads of food. I mean, just amazing response at the ground level. So that's how that works. But if you support either auxiliary or get a hold of us on the contact page, right? Then we can find a place for you, because there are people that I got hit the other day by somebody building a facility up in Oklahoma, and it's great because I know the guy from Green Berets, and he's a buddy. He's already vetted, and so I'm like, okay, that's a good one. I can trust that I'm going to go up and visit it. They're in the groundbreaking stage, but we'll just keep rocking, keep moving forward.
Let's talk a little bit about North Carolina before we close out here.
Sure.
So you guys went. What was your mission there? And of course, I know a lot about what you did, but
Yeah,
just for
yeah. Tell
people.
folks. Yeah. So our mission there was started out with Mike Hall and Matt Barnes, so my team, getting a hold of me. I was working on something on the southwest border here, and I had to finish it up. And I said, "Hey, go, man! Get in the truck and go." Well, that's how it happened. Well, okay, so there's two ways to look at missions. One is a real deep development, a deep dive into the problem sets, and we call that military decision making process in the military. That's one. And then the other one is like what we do mostly is develop the situation on the ground once you get there, because you don't know what you're going to see. And that's why people that in those worlds that operate that way succeed in chaos, right? Chaos doesn't help the people that need the long, planning stages. So we knew that we were going to go look for kids that possibly were being taken. We didn't know. We had heard rumor. We did find out that that did happen, but it got before we got out there, they were already on a ship on their way to Africa, unfortunately. Um, but what we did find when we got on the ground was that we could go look for work. So our advanced team went out. They started doing water samples. They started figuring out what towns and what areas, what the needs were, what local communities had the wheel and spoke distribution centers that were going out and supplying the more robust ones, the ones that were really getting things done. And then we were able to narrow it down to about 5 different groups on the ground down there who are now we're going to look back a little bit. Uh, we'll look forward, but we're going to look back and go, now where we're at now, all 5 of those are talking directly to the FEMA director, the current interim FEMA director appointed by Trump. That's Cameron Hamilton, great guy. Uh, FEMA Cam is what he is on X. Look him up. He's really helping out. But this guy's listening to us. This is a personal relationship. I just happen to know him, a former SEAL. But this is those things now. What did we do? Well, we resulted in them being able to now talk directly to FEMA. We didn't know that was going to happen. But what we did on the ground, exposing FEMA camps that were, there for a few weeks and then didn't do anything and left. Hundreds of millions of dollars wasted. So we expose, we analyze, and then we report back, and then send out also the needs list. So this is what they need. Winter's coming. Hey, we don't need Kleenex anymore. We need this or that. Blankets and heating elements. So those things require some thought processes, but you don't know till you get there. So that's what we did.
And for the people who didn't know, when I got kicked out of North Carolina by the state, they actually came in and kind of helped make sure we could do what we needed to do. So there was support on that side
That's
of it
right.
too.
Yeah, getting you out to do more of a house call type of thing, which was amazing. You and your crew. We did meet you there at Avery Airport and at the fixed facility that was more like a bandage operation. And for me, and we'd call it like a battalion aid station, so like an aid station, not a hospital by any means, but it was able to help us as we were flying in and out to come back. And go, hey, we need this guy plussed up on an IV. We've been working 24, 48 hours. All the things that you guys did, but also so much more, because a lot of it's just sitting down talking to people. They're just burnout, and that
Yep,
that really helps.
absolutely. So once again, where can people follow you? Where can they find you? And where can they support your mission?
Yeah, Doc Pete Chambers, DOC Pete Chambers, common spelling with an S at the end on X. I'm on Truth Social, look it up the same way. And then on Telegram, Doc Pete LFW, look for work. But Doc Pete, you can find me. Just look for the guy that looks like me. And then I'm also on the Remnant Ministry TX.org. And those are really the main ways. And there's also a prayer request pages coming up, and now we have a prayer team of about 4 full-time that will be answering people and talking, because corporate prayer is important. Even Pat knew that going into the Battle of the Bulge. Got every troop to pray. Hey, look, it's a thing. It works.
And if you're out there and just want to support a group that's true to intention, is not getting rich off of this, is just truly doing God's work, this is a great organization to support.
Thank you.
Out there doing good work and taking care of fellow man. So in so many different ways. So I would highly encourage you make that recurring donation to them because it's worth it. And I've seen the work firsthand, and you don't want to know what they're doing.
And
So
I'm gonna also throw out there too, the James Clinic. You guys really, this person right here supporting us, whether whether we like it or not medically, sometimes we need it and we won't admit it. And getting in our chili a little bit and saying, hey, you guys need to do this and that. She's got our team tuned back up. And also I've just seen her with people and she's just got a great heart. She truly epitomizes what, because I watched a man like that with my dad doing house calls in the country back when I was a kid. Uh, I see that in her. She's got that heart for people. Um, but she can take care of business as well, which is awesome. Great attributes.
yeah, thank you. Final thoughts today. For somebody who's out there and just in the world today, they're living in anxiety. They don't know what's coming, don't know
Yeah.
what to do moving forward, right? Trump's back in, but it seems better, but yet there's still a lot of things that need to be righted.
Yeah,
What would
okay,
you
so yeah, exactly. This is a great question because that's probably the number 3 question I get on the road. What can we do? And I'm nervous, I'm anxious, you can tell. And it's chaos and people get nervous in chaos. So the key to controlling the chaos is not controlling it. It's just letting it control itself, but to control the things you can. So if you can get on and get with our prayer groups, and if you want to pray, if you want to support, once you start doing things, you will feel better because you're taking control of a piece of the chaos. Can't control it all. Don't ever think you can. But you got to understand that Philippians 4, 6, and 7, right? Do not be anxious about anything, but through prayer and petition, present requests, and the peace of God that transcends all understanding will guard your heart and your mind. If you start doing that just alone, that's enough. But action, right? It's the action. It's the little victory. That's what we in POW camps tell our guys. If you're captured, little victories will lead to your mind staying, kind of like you've got a job. Look for work, get out there and do stuff. Small scale. Get with community groups. Know your neighbors. Grow something. Plant something. Eat well. Exercise. All those things. They all decrease the anxiety levels. Sleep. Sleep is so important. Get a red light. Start looking at the wavelengths that get in your brain and get that melatonin, natural stuff going. Cortisol levels under control. Sleep is key. Once you start doing all that, it'll trickle, and it'll be a watershed effect, and you'll feel like have purpose and function.
great advice from Dr. Pete Chambers. You're always one of our favorite guests. So thank you for coming back on.
Always.
We'll have you keep us updated on what you're doing because it is interesting, and we will get you back on soon.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you, Molly.
Thank you. And thank you for listening to the Dr. Mollie James Show. Tune in next time for another great episode. Till then, we'll see you.